Hi everyone, I hope you all are doing well and I hope your families are safe and healthy and whatnot. And I hope you guys are getting through your classes as best as you can. My name is Asia McIntyre and I did my capstone on social learning theory and today's research. Traditionally, social learning theory has concentrated on like the way people learn or like how they learn. It's believed that um, we learn from watching others with particular attention to modeling and simulating. In the early years, like in 1960s, social learning theories underlining foundations were on behavioralism, giving attention to the roles of environmental stimuli and consequences like reinforcement and punishment in learning and behavior. It has extended far beyond learning through pure observation to incorporate individuals' understandings of what they see, their expectations and assumptions regarding future events, consequences, and their belief about their ability to successfully accomplish challenging tasks. Today, social learning theory has progressively depicted learning and behavior as being controlled not by environmental circumstances and inheritance, but rather by the students themselves or the individuals themselves. So, a little bit of history on the subject. Albert Bandura, which y'all probably know pretty much a lot about by now, is known as the father of social cognitive learning. He is an important person in the building of psychology in general. Um, Social learning theory is a long studied theory. It was developed and published in various stages between 1934 and 1947. And social learning theory combines cognitive learning and behavioral learning theories. Cognitive learning theories states that learning is influenced by psychological factors, and then behavioral learning theory assumes that learning is based on responses to environmental stimuli. So Bandura created the famous Bobo doll experiment. And in the studies, children watched adults either perform violent or passive conduct toward the Bobo doll, and then it was believed that what they saw influenced what the kids did basically, or how they conducted or interacted with the Bobo doll. So children who watched vicious behavior imitated what they saw. They too were physically and verbally vicious and violent toward the Bobo doll. And children who saw peaceful conduct toward the Bobo doll were less forceful and more peaceful toward the doll when they played with the doll. Bandura, from this study, Bandura believed or presumed that children learned hostility, brutality, and other social practices through perceptual learning, or they learned from what they saw. This study was significant because this moved away from behavioralism or behavioralism's instincts that all behavior is directed by reinforcement and rewards. However, as of late, a few psychologists have raised doubts about Bandura's discoveries, marking it as one-sided, ineffectively structured, and unethical. The Bobo doll experiment, led by Bandura, has frequently been used for the argument that observing aggressive behavior leads to aggressive behavior, basically. So, seeing it on television or in person results in the spread of such aggressive behaviors. However, the Bobo doll experiment contains a lot of defects in its strategies, and it has a lot of errors. This doesn't completely discount the results of the experiment. However, it calls into questions whether it ought to be normally utilized as proof as such a genuine case, or if more thorough experiments should be given more attention. So just some of the things that were kind of wrong with this experiment. First, the sample. In any sample or any study, a sample is an important part of the process. The sample must be diverse and representative of the population in order to successfully apply the results of the study on a larger population. In addition, in order to confirm that no sampling bias is present, the sample must be random. At first glance, the sample that was tested or used in the bubble doll experiment was acceptable. There's the same number of boys and girls that were tested, all similar age. They were also divided equally among three groups. The adult group had two adults, one male and one female, so it was representative of both of the sexes. However, all the boys and girls selected in the study came from the same nursery school. This brings into question how valid the results are and whether or not the results of the Bandura study can be applied onto a larger population. At first glance, the sample size seems fairly sizable. However, the number of groups and subgroups he had ended up spreading his sample pretty thin, leaving a large amount of room for error based simply on human differences. It would be disrepresentable to apply what was found in the experiment onto other scenarios. The use of the study was also limited and the conditions were very isolated. Their experiment, which involved one child at a time with a single adult present, was a situation much less likely to occur organically or outside of the laboratory. Like the sample, experimental conditions must be appropriate to conduct possible experiences like in the real world or in the course of people's everyday life. If not, the results of the study will not stand up will only stand up in very specific conditions or basically only in the laboratory. In the real world, children often have many adults or non-adult role models in their lives that influence them, not just one, like in the bubble doll experiment. There are also other things that influence our behavior. Then one of the biggest criticism of Bandura's bubble doll experiment was the lack of consequences given to the child for aggressive behavior. After all, fear of consequences is one of the main factors that keep people abiding, lawful, and cooperative. In the experiment, not only were there no outside penalties given by a society or a guardian for misbehaving, but there were none of these natural deterrents either. In reality, if we were to hit another person, they would fall or cry or bleed or hit back. Whereas in the bubble doll, this didn't occur. Consequences stop people from acting in certain ways. Bandura's theory was also criticized by biological theorists. They argued that it ignored biological states and automatic nervous system responses. Some behaviors and responses are not solely learned, but they are also inherited. And in the bubble doll experiment, this was not talked about at all. It is important to study, and take a look at studies critically so that future experiments can learn from their mistakes and succeed and become more accurate. Some of the most popular games like Grand Theft Auto, Fortnite, and Call of Duty feature violence of some kind of way. The question still stands: does violence in video games impact real-world behavior? Experts say there is little to no evidence that link real-world violence to video games. Stanley Pierre, who is an associate professor at the University of Oxford, who studied digital media, states, games have only become more realistic. The players in games and violent games have become more diverse, and they're played all around the world now. Video games are about more than just fun. They make us more creative, better thinkers, more inquisitive, and brings us closer together. Video games teach us how to cooperate and to collaborate. Thanks to the passion of video game developers and publishers and players across the globe, the future of interactive entertainment is brighter and better than ever before. The U.S. Supreme Court, the U.S. Surgeon General, and the United States Nations of Children's Welfare Organizations are also a few experts that asserted that that they found no research or links between video game and real world violence. Advertisements attempt to use social learning. Social learning is a fairly rudimentary yet powerful way to conceptualize how mass media images like advertisement affect how we behave and what we think is incorrect or correct. It requires remembering and recalling an explicit behavior. It is more likely to be effective for more central processed messages and therefore complements classical conditioning. Advertisements works even when people are not paying close attention to them. Advertising media is used to showcase marketing content, which is communicated in various forms like speech, text, radio, or images or videos, or things online. A well-constructed advertisement will convince the public that they should buy the product or a product or subscribe to a service being advertised. Social learning theory has become the most leading theory of development and learning. It is grounded in many of the basic concepts of traditional learning theory. This theory has frequently been called the connection between behavioralistic learning and cognitive learning theories. It incorporates attention to memory, attention, and motivation. Based on previous studies, learning is defined as a persisting change in human behavior or perception. Its potential as a result of the learner's interaction with the environment. There are three concepts in social learning theory. People can learn from or through observation, which is observational learning. People are intrinsic, or they learn from intrinsic reinforcement. Then lastly, learning does not necessarily lead to change. Although heavily supported through empirical research, the primary criticism of social learning theory includes that it assumes passivity in the nature of the observer who receives reward or punishment, that the theory does not explain why certain behaviors are rewarded or punished, and it fails to explain why some individuals will not conform to social norms. One of the biggest criticisms of social learning theory is its primary concepts. These concepts tend to increase association with deviant peers. They increase the likelihood that the individual will adopt attitudes and values favorable to criminal conduct through the mechanism of reward and punishment. The criticism centers on the temporal ordering or of the adaptation of deviant attitudes and behaviors and the association with other deviant peers. The cause of the misbehavior, from a critic's point of view, is not in relation to the deviant peers. Instead, delinquent behavior or attitudes favorable to an established or basically these behaviors and attitude are established before contact with the group. So it's not the group that makes them that way, which people assume. But these things are already within the person. Social learning theory is a theory of learning process and social conduct, which suggests that new behavior can be obtained by watching and imitating others. Learning is not a one-dimensional simple process. It is complex and contains a lot of levels. It takes place in many different ways, and there are a wide variety of factors that influence what people learn and how they developed. Some people or children are naturally aggressive, even if they don't play video games or watch gruesome TV shows. This clearly defies the concept of the previous definition of social learning theory, which states that violence and or other behaviors can only be learned through either direct experience or watching another person experience something. Social learning theory tends to discount, or the older social learning theory tends to discount other influential characteristics. Social learning might play a part, but does not solely teach people how to think or act or behave. Again, it's those other factors that play a role in how we learn things. Thank you.